Good evening. I'm your friend Scotty Ray, and we've got a very important date in the state of Mississippi. It's next Tuesday. It's a runoff election. It's for the 3rd Congressional District, as Michael Cassidy is challenging Congressman Michael Guest. Now, earlier in the week, we heard from Mr. Cassidy. Now it's the Congressman's turn to talk. He was busy. He couldn't make it in live to the studio, so we're going to join him on the road somewhere in the state of Mississippi as he's out campaigning. Let's now join the Congressman to hear what he's got to say. Let me ask this, because I've never had a chance to go to Washington. Is it really like a cool feeling when you sit down in Washington and you go, oh my gosh, I'm a congressman from the state of Mississippi? Is it surreal?
Well, I tell you, as somebody who grew up in Mississippi, never thinking that I would serve or hold any political office, when you first get up to D.C., you are a little bit awestruck, looking at and seeing the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, being able the first time that you walk there on the floor of the House chamber. But I tell you that very quickly that wears off, and you see that Washington, D.C. then becomes nothing more than your workstation or your duty station. I did not move my family to Washington, D.C. I did not want to raise my children there. And so I have been commuting back and forth for the last 3.5 years. I'm proud to say that there have only been 2 weekends that I have stayed in Washington, D.C. During that 3.5 years. One was because my younger son came up and spent the weekend with me, and so we got to spend some father-son time together. And the other was just during the heart of COVID when there were really no flights home. I would have been home for less than 12 hours because of the flight schedule. So, I have a very small, modest apartment there that I stay in. I spend most of my days working. The days start early and run long. But truly, it has been an honor to represent the people of Mississippi's 3rd Congressional District in Washington, D.C.
Now, you've got 2 kids, is that right?
I do. I've got 2 boys. My youngest graduated this year from Brandon High School and will be attending Mississippi State as a freshman. My older son graduated Brandon High School 3 years ago, and he will be a senior at Mississippi State. And so both myself and my wife graduated from Mississippi State along with my parents and her dad. So these will be the 3rd generation of Mississippi State Bulldogs. And after graduating from state, went on to Ole Miss Law School. So I tell people I'm somewhat politically correct. I can pander to both of my major college fan bases with Mississippi State and Ole Miss. And we wish the Ole Miss Rebels success this weekend in the College World Series.
Yes. All right, let me ask this. You seem to be pretty strong on the border. Where do you stand on this? And let me ask this: when it comes to the border, aren't you on a committee with that also?
Yeah, I'm vice ranking member, so that means I'm the number 2 Republican on Homeland Security. Homeland Security Committee does have the law enforcement, Border Patrol, U.S. Customs that are responsible for securing the border. I was down the border twice during April. I went to Eagle Pass, Texas, for 3 or 4 days, and also went to El Paso, Texas. And then late last year, I was down in McAllen. So have taken 3 fairly recent trips to the border. When we're down there, of course, we're meeting with law enforcement officers, both federal, state, and local. We're meeting with elected leaders, community leaders. And I tell you, Scott, when we were down there in April, we heard 2 things from everybody we talked to without exception. One is that this is the worst that they have ever seen the border as far as the number of immigrants coming across the border. And then 2, that they feel like that under this administration, the administration of President Biden, that the federal government has abandoned them. And they are pleading for help. And the numbers bear that out. If you look under President Trump's, his last numbers, his last month in office, roughly 77,000 encounters along the southwest border. The last numbers that we have from U.S. Customs and Border Patrol says that most recently that there have been 234,000. So roughly a 300% increase in a matter of just over 15, 16 months. You talk about narcotic seizures along the border, and being a former prosecutor, I know that many of the narcotics, the large majority of narcotics that enter the United States come across our unsecured southwest border. Last year, fiscal year 2021, there were 2.5 billion dosage units of fentanyl And you and I know that fentanyl is the most addictive, the most dangerous drug that we've ever seen. Many of the overdose deaths that we see now are caused by people who are ingesting something laced with fentanyl. Even more disturbing is that there were 17 billion dosage units of methamphetamine seized across the border. And that's just what we're seizing. And so if we're seizing somewhere less than half, probably closer to 10 to 20%, think of the amount of narcotics that are continuing to flow across the southwest border. And we know that once those drugs flow across the border, that drug cartels use our interstate systems to transport those drugs across the country. So those drugs are flowing up and down I-20, I-59 there through Lauderdale County on a daily basis. I know Sheriff Solly has historically had a very active interdiction program. When I was in Rankin County, we had a very active interdiction program operated by both the Richland Police Department and the Rankin County Sheriff's Department. And I've been able to be part of some of those seizures to where we've taken vehicles, sometimes passenger cars, sometimes commercial vehicles off the road that are either containing large amounts of narcotics or in some cases drug funds, the proceeds of those drug sales. And so this is something that affects every community. What happens at the border does not just affect those adjacent communities, those towns, those counties there that are along the Rio Grande River. What happens on the border affects every community. And there's a saying on Homeland Security that every community is a border community. And I think that that's true with what we're seeing and the flow of narcotics that's being spread across the country.
Tell me your thoughts on this, because I've seen this in the news several times. The governor of Texas, how do you feel about him loading up the immigrants that are showing up illegally and taking them to Washington and dropping them off? Do you agree with that, or do you think maybe he shouldn't have?
No, I agree. Look, this shouldn't be his problem. And unfortunately, all this has been dumped on his doorstep. The governor is doing everything that he can to secure the border. So you have Texas National Guardsmen standing side by side with federal law enforcement agents. They're patrolling the river in gunboats, seeking both to prevent people from trying to cross and also assisting in apprehension. And so this shouldn't be the problem that exists solely in Texas or Arizona or New Mexico or California. I agree. This should be something that should be brought to the doorsteps of the United States Capitol. We should be able to, as Congress, we have the ability to secure the border. We just have an administration that is unwilling to do so. We saw under President Trump. President Trump had a border surge that lasted for a few months. We saw President Trump quickly put in procedures and policies that stopped that. One of the things that was the most effective policy is the Remain in Mexico policy, where individuals, immigrants who had come across the border trying to claim asylum, instead of being allowed to remain in the United States while those claims were heard, they were returned to Mexico, and they had to wait in Mexico until an asylum judge ruled on those claims. We know that President Joe Biden, day one, he stopped that. He stopped the Remain in Mexico policy. He stopped the wall construction. I've been down there and I've seen areas where the wall just stopped. Wall construction has begun. The president issued an executive order stopping wall construction there on the spot. And so you've got a fence that will go for some period of time and just stop. And when you're talking to those federal agents down there, they say, look, the immigrants know where the wall is. The immigrants know where the wall's not. They're coming across the border where the wall stops. And so we have the ability to restart wall construction when Republicans retake Congress. We have the ability to re-implement programs such as Remain in Mexico, make sure that Title 42 remains in place. Because the thing that's going to stop this is once these immigrants hit U.S. soil, if they're very quickly returned back home, they're going to stop coming. The reason that they're not stopping now is because once they hit U.S. soil, this administration is allowing them to remain in the country until those asylum claims are heard. And sometimes we're looking at an average delay of roughly 3 years, depending upon where you cross the border, before you get a court date, see a federal judge making those asylum claims, and roughly 80% of those claims are ultimately denied. And so this is a problem that this administration has created, and a problem which Republicans can solve if we're able to retake Congress.
All right, now we're just barely a few days away from the runoff that will be coming up. Now, a few things, and I travel here, there, and yonder. I have a lot of people that ask me questions and go, look, I don't understand this. One of the big things that have come out in the last couple of days is an email from Neshoba County urging Democrats to go vote Republican in your favor. Do you know anything about this email? Did you endorse it? Do you know how it began? And as we go back and look at history, we would have to go back to when Thad Cochran was running, if you remember that, and Senator Chris McDaniel was attempting to get it, and then it was kind of like the gates opened up on him. And is this something similar to that? Is it somebody that did this on their own? Or are you aware of it?
I was made aware of it late last night. Was contacted. Someone had seen it on social media, had sent it to me. I'll just tell you that that's not anything that's being put out by me personally. It's not being anything put out by my campaign. If you look at our campaign, I think you'll see that we are trying to reach conservative voters. We're campaigning on our conservative record. We're campaigning on the fact that we think that we represent the morals and the values of the 3rd Congressional District, and that we are more conservative than our opponent. That is not a message that would resonate with Democratic voters. And so anything that was sent out encouraging Democrats to vote in the Republican primary did not come from me personally and did not come from my campaign.
All right. With that same thought, Benny Thompson, it's my understanding he's endorsing you now for Democrats to vote for you.
Well, that's the first I've heard of that. So Benny Thompson and I, we don't generally vote together. 9 times out of 10, we're going to have opposing votes. We're both from the same state, but outside of that, there's not a lot that Benny and I agree on. And so if Benny Thompson is endorsing me, that is the first I've heard. I've had no conversations with Benny Thompson in some manner of time. And so I'm going to have to say, Scotty, that is inaccurate. It's incorrect. You know, there's been a lot of things said throughout this campaign that ultimately turned out to be disinformation. And I'm going to have to say that's the same thing. Benny and I have not called. We've not talked. I've not asked for his endorsement and truly don't want his endorsement in this race.
Well, and good. I'm glad you set the record straight on that. The next thing, as we get to things that are out there being said there, I guess this all kind of ties in together. January 6th.
Yes.
You were one of 35 that voted, if I'm wording this right, you may have to straighten me out on this. I'm just the common guy here, for them to investigate it, to see if there was any crimes committed. Was this tied in any way, anything in this bill also with Planned Parenthood? Was that snuck inside that bill? Because I've also heard that you voted for something that had money for Planned Parenthood in it.
Yes, sir. And let's talk about those because they're really completely different, and I'm happy to address both. First, I'll address January 6th. What I want you and I want all your listeners to know is that I did not vote for and I do not support the current Nancy Pelosi January 6th committee that we have now that's chaired by Benny Thompson. I would tell you that I believe it is a political witch hunt. This is a committee that is out to make President Trump look bad and make all conservatives look bad. What I did vote to support is prior to that, there was a bipartisan bill, which means had support of both Republicans and Democrats, to create a law enforcement commission. That commission would have been made up of 5 law enforcement officers appointed by Republicans, 5 law enforcement officers appointed by Democrats. We would not have seen career politicians who were trying to use this position as a way to score political points. That commission would have had very limited subpoena power, and that commission would have had to have completed their inquiry within 6 months of that commission being formed. So by the end of last year, that commission, if it would have been established, would have had to complete their report to Congress, and we would not have the spectacle of primetime committee hearings that we're seeing now. You know, I think we even have seen President Trump come out, just this past weekend. President Trump came out recently and said it was foolish that Republicans not have representation on what is currently being looked into January 6th inquiry or investigation. The commission that I supported not only would have had Republican appointees, but there would have been equal Republicans to Democrats. And so I supported something very different than what we have now. And I will tell you that if the people of East Mississippi and the 3rd District send me back to Washington, D.C., that I hope on day one that I'll have the ability to vote to disband the current January 6th committee.
And I think this deals with, when somebody hears this, all they know is, okay, this could have been against President Trump when a vote is cast that way. And I think that's where the confusion comes from.
Yeah, and let me tell you that, when I was the time that I've been serving in office, and when President Trump was president, I supported his policies 95% of the time. I voted against impeachment not once but twice. I actually spoke on the House floor in opposition of impeachment. I voted against certifying the election in Arizona and Pennsylvania when those votes were held on the House floor. And I also was co-chair of his reelection campaign here in Mississippi. And so for somebody to try to say that I don't support President Trump, that I don't support his policies, that I in any shape, form, or fashion and not pro-Trump is just completely inaccurate. And all people have to do is look at my record, and they'll see that when he was in office, that I was a staunch supporter of President Trump. And if President Trump chooses to run again, then I will support him in his bid to be reelected president of the United States.
And the next thing, especially where you and I come from, God is a huge part of our makeup in our community. And with that, especially with what come from the Supreme Court of Roe versus Wade being reversed, abortion is a hot topic in Mississippi, and most Mississippians, not all, are in favor of abolishing that to where that can't happen anymore. We look at it as somebody's life that could be somebody. Where does this come from that you either in some bill, shape, form, or way put money towards Planned Parenthood? Where did that come from, and did that happen?
Well, first of all, I want you to know that there can be no more pro-life candidate in this race than I am. That I have the support of the two major pro-life groups, not the support, but the endorsement of National Right to Life and the Susan B. Anthony Foundation. Again, the two leading pro-life groups in Washington, D.C. for my 100% voting record on pro-life issues. You talked about Roe v. Wade being overturned. It was just overturned. The opinion came out earlier today. It was overturned by a case coming out of Mississippi, Dobbs v. Jackson. I was in D.C. In December when Dobbs v. Jackson was being argued before the Supreme Court. I was there and I addressed the rally on the steps of the Supreme Court as we were prayerfully hopeful that what happened today would be the ultimate outcome. I actually led the amicus brief to Congress, led the amicus brief on behalf of members of Congress to the United States Supreme Court, setting forth both factually and legally why Roe v. Wade should be overturned. And if people still believe that in some shape, form, or fashion that I support Planned Parenthood, I just encourage people to go to their website. Planned Parenthood has a website where they rank every member of Congress. They give you a number grade of 0 to 100, 100 being those that support them 100% of the time, and 0 being those that do not support their agenda. And I'm proud to say both this Congress and last Congress, I have a score of 0 with Planned Parenthood. What my opponent is trying to allege is because I supported a bill that would have funded the government in its entirety, that would have funded the military, that would have funded our highways, that would have funded our federal law enforcement, that would have made sure that our seniors receive their Social Security check, that somehow is a bill to support Planned Parenthood. And I want you to know that in that vote, not only did I vote that way, but every Mississippi member of Congress voted that way. And so if my opponent is trying to twist that and trying to mislead people and say because of that, then I support Planned Parenthood, then you're going to have to say, well, so does Trent Kelly, so does Stephen Palazzo, so does Cindy Hyde-Smith, and so does Roger Wicker. I would just tell you that the Mississippi delegation does not support Planned Parenthood. I personally don't support Planned Parenthood, and I would not have received the endorsement of those key pro-life groups if I was voting with Planned Parenthood and voting to fund them.
All right, as we get into this, and of course, I have one laying here somewhere because they've come in the mail. The group that is sending out mailers to everybody, it's been what most Mississippians around me are referring to as the Great Mudslinging Campaign, as it has begun now. Does this come from your campaign? On the piece of paper, it says friends of yours, is the way it's worded.
Yeah, many of the pieces of direct mail do come from our campaign. We tried, leading up to the 7th, we tried to take the high road. We tried not to get in the dirt with our opponent, but our opponent was sending out direct mail pieces. He was running ads on television. He was making calls to people alleging that I was supporting Benny Thompson and Nancy Pelosi in this select committee, which wasn't true, alleging that I support Planned Parenthood, which wasn't true. And so we tried to take the high road throughout those days leading up to the 7th. We saw after the results of the 7th, basically a statistical tie between myself and Mr. Cassidy, that we were going to have to take the gloves off and we were going to have to punch back. And so what we have tried to do is use truthful information, talking about the dangerous spending plans that my opponent has offered. These plans were up on his website for months. They've been evaluated and it's determined that it would include $48 trillion in new spending, that my opponent supported Medicare for all, something that no Republican in Congress would ever support or ever run a campaign on. Medicare for all is more in line with what we see with the Socialist Democrats. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, they support that. We see that our opponent supports universal income for people with children, that our opponent supported giving new married couples $20,000 once they ultimately walked down the aisle and became wed. Those are not Republican proposals. Those are big spending proposals that we can't afford. You know, as I'm out every day, guys, I'm talking to people about what are the key issues that they're concerned about. They're concerned with inflation, which is at a record high that we've not seen in over 5 decades. And they're concerned with high gas prices. And this additional spending that was proposed by my opponent before he removed it from his website would have done nothing but exacerbate that. And so we think it's important that people know and that we remind people who we are, that I'm the candidate who's lived in Mississippi for 50 years, that I'm educated here in our public schools, that I've chosen to call Mississippi my home since childhood, that I've spent 25 years as both an assistant prosecutor and then the elected DA here in Madison and Rankin County, and then the time that I have served the people of the 3rd District in Washington, D.C., that if we're going to remind people of that, we also have to contrast ourselves to our opponent. Our opponent, again, proposed a $48 trillion spending plan, and he's someone who just registered to vote in Lauderdale County last year. I've been registered to vote and have voted every election that I recall since 1988. I believe that elections matter, whether they're city elections, county elections, state elections, or federal elections. And I've also instilled that in my children, the importance of voting. And that's one thing that we didn't see this election cycle. If you look at voter turnout across the 3rd Congressional District, it was right at 10%. So that means that 9 out of every 10 registered voters did not go to the polls on the 7th. And our hope is
it was low, wasn't it?
Yes, sir, extremely low. And so what our hope is that we're able to get Republican voters back out to the polls. Those that didn't vote on the 7th can still go to the polls on the 28th. And that's been what we've been focusing on, driving voter turnout with Republican voters, and at the same time trying to contrast who we are and what we stand for versus our opponent.
All right, another question that's been brought up a lot. Did you turn down a debate, and would you still consider doing a debate with the opponent in between? You know, we don't have many days left, but did you turn it down, or what was the reasoning there?
Well, you know, just last week, we were both in Oktibbeha County in Starkville. We were both there. We both had the opportunity to address and answer questions from Republican group there in Oktibbeha County. We've spoken before in Madison County and Rankin County at the same thing. So I'm not ducking, I'm not dodging my opponent. But on the other time, you know, we have to understand that, look, this is a huge district. It's 23 counties. We're traveling each and every day to try to make sure that we are reaching the people throughout the district. And that's what we're going to continue to do. We're going to continue to travel throughout the district. Last Friday, I was in Lauderdale County. This week, I've been in Winston County, Marion County, Neshoba County, Hines, Rankin, Madison. I'll be in Lincoln County on Saturday and Sunday. So we're trying to be in as many places as we can, again, travel throughout the district. And look, making people and reminding people of who we are and what we stand for.
Okay. As we get closer to this, jobs for the state of Mississippi, Is there any industry that you see coming that's going to bring jobs, especially to the East Mississippi side? I know that we've had some big deals going on in Jackson with Amazon and those areas, and then even in the north, we start seeing car manufacturing. Is there anything that you see that will affect and help the people that live in East Mississippi side with job-wise? What do you see?
I tell you that when we're over there, we're meeting with people that specialize in economic development, and I'll tell you that there have been several instances where we've been told that Meridian has made that short list of 2 or 3 sites that ultimately, for some reason or another, passed over. I think Meridian is poised for growth. When you see that you've got Interstate 20 and Interstate 59 that converge there, you've got rail. You're right there along the Mississippi-Alabama line. We've got an airport there in Meridian. I would tell you that the people who put these economic deals together are working very hard. We've seen recent improvements there in the industrial park. And so, we're going to continue to work with them any way that we can to offer federal assistance. So if we have, say, Amazon wants to build a facility in East Mississippi, we know that we've had a couple of major car and tire manufacturers located in Mississippi. If we have a major industry like that, we're going to do everything that we can as part of the federal delegation to show our support for that. And we've done that before. I've done videos to various companies along with city officials, county officials, and state officials trying to help just land that big one. And I tell you that I think East Mississippi is very close. Now, what they're currently working on and who they're talking to, if you know that, Scotty, a lot of times those things are top secret. Sometimes it's hard for even us to find out exactly who they're negotiating with. But I'll tell you that the folks in Lauderdale County and the Mississippi Economic Development, they're trying to do all that they can to land some sort of major manufacturing facility there in East Mississippi, and particularly in Lauderdale County.
All right, and I know you're busy, and I'm biting into your time. I see this in Jackson every day as I go over news headlines. Meridian, Jackson, I'm not even sure what the number is. It's got to be high. Murders. Little Meridian, Mississippi is up to 9 murders now. Crime is overtaking our city, and I watch it every day. We just saw where the sentencing of the state trooper that was killed working his part-time job. The guy got sentenced on this. Murder after murder. What can we do in Mississippi to curb this crime? We look to our city council here and we don't hear a whole lot. People are worried. We've actually had shootings on our major fairways in broad daylight now. What can be done from your level to help us feel more secure and take that step to push deterrence in crime?
Yeah, well, I talk about on a local level and then on state level. I think on a local level, you need to have aggressive enforcement of laws. We can't be proactive, we can't be reactive. We have to be proactive. We've got to be in the community before the crimes occur. We've got to make sure that we have a presence, and I say we, being law enforcement, whether that be the city police, whether that be the sheriff's department, whether that be people from the Mississippi Highway Patrol. We've got to make sure that law enforcement has that presence, that law enforcement is seen. And then we've also got to work to make sure that those cases are quickly and aggressively prosecuted. I know Cassie Coleman is the DA over in Lauderdale County. I've had the chance to work with her. I think she does an amazing job. But we see, maybe not in Lauderdale County, but I know particularly in Hinds County, many of the violent crimes that we see are committed by people who are out on bond. They're awaiting trial. I know in Hinds County, the wait of trial is not months, but is now years. And they're committing additional crimes while out on bond. Some of the things that we've looked at doing since we've been in office is we've introduced legislation that would expand the availability of body cams, particularly body cams for mid to small size agencies. Grant money to make sure that those are available. As a prosecutor, I've been able to use body cam video in courtroom trials and settings. And I will tell you that it is a very powerful piece of evidence. You or I could get up before jury and we could tell what happened. But when the jury actually gets to see that and see exactly what the officer saw and exactly what the officer encountered, I will tell you that is powerful evidence. Not only is it powerful evidence, it also stops a lot of times baseless claims against law enforcement. I know that law enforcement at times that there are claims made against them that an officer verbally assaulted them or physically assaulted some member of the public. With body cams, that's easily disputed. You can put the tape in and you can watch and you can see the interaction between the citizen and law enforcement. And we know that a large majority of those claims, that those claims are baseless and inaccurate. So we're working to make sure that we are expanding the availability of body cameras to not only law enforcement there in Meridian, but some of your smaller towns and cities that may just have a handful of officers, 3, 4, 5. They can't afford to write for a federal grant to be able to do that. We've got to make sure that money is flowing down from the federal government to the state government and that those grants are available. The other thing, we've recently introduced legislation that would help crimes labs such as in Mississippi. One of the delays we sometimes see in cases getting to trial is that evidence sometimes takes weeks, if not months, to be processed. That evidence could be drug evidence. It could be firearms that were waiting on ballistic evidence. It could be fingerprints, DNA, you name it, autopsy reports, as to the finding of the medical examiner as to cause and manner of death. Those are things which sometimes delay prosecution. And so we've introduced legislation that would provide additional funding for our state crime labs, particularly crime labs like Mississippi, where every single piece of evidence generally is funneled through those crime labs. Very few cities outside of potentially the city of Jackson have a municipal crime lab. And so we see those backlogs. So those are things that we're doing. The other thing that we're looking at is what can we do to make sure that in crimes of violence that the federal authorities, particularly the U.S. Attorney's Office, would have the ability to come in and prosecute on a federal level. We know that federal cases generally take a much shorter period of time to get those cases to trial, to have those things resolved. And so we're working with some of our current and former U.S. attorneys, getting their input on what they would like to see that would give them a greater authority to come in and help places like Jackson, or in some cases places like Meridian, where you see that spike in violent crime.
In closing, tell me why somebody should vote for you. Your bid of vote for me. Why should somebody do that?
I would tell everyone that is listening or watching, that Mississippi is my home. It's been my home for 50 years. This is where I was raised. This is where I chose to live and raise a family. That I have a background in public serving, of having served both as a former prosecutor and now as a member of Congress. And I will tell you that I believe that I am the true conservative candidate in this race. Heritage Action, which is a very conservative group in D.C., they gave me a ranking of 94, the highest ranking of any member of the Mississippi delegation. And so I represent the morals and the values of the people of Mississippi. And we ask the people of not only East Mississippi, but the entire 3rd District to allow us to continue to return to Washington and to continue to build on the foundation that has been laid.
Well, I can't thank you enough for joining us today, and I hope you have a great evening, and we wish you best of luck next week as Mississippians head to the polls. Thank you, Congressman.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, and love to get back on again sometime.
Will do.
Thank you.